Okay, good morning everyone, once again from the frosty, or cold anyway, and rainy New York City. This is the final week of my trip. It's basically a kibbutz Avim to visit with my mother, so I was like in Stark. And I wanted to just mention some of my experiences here in the context of this week, Parshas Vayishlach, which is such an incredibly important week as we think about the relationship between Yaacov Avinu and the world of Esav, and also even more internally with the wars within Klal Yisrael that need to be resolved as we clear the path for the Geula. So the key word for today is called Venezuela. Something is happening in the world that we should take notice of. And I'm going to comment on it from the perspective of the Parsha, as we always do. Okay, so let's begin. Rabbi Menachem Begin, when he was going to Camp David in 1979, and was under the auspices of the then Jimmy Carter, who, as I once explained to you, was a very difficult figure. He was very, very, in the end, adamantly a foe of Israel, used his position as a Democratic president, which was otherwise failed. See, I'll explain Jimmy Carter's failure and what it has to do with this week's Parsha. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zechatzaddik Livracha told Menachem Begin at that point in 1979, I believe it was, that you're going to speak to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, of course, is devoutly Christian. His theology was based on the fact that the Jewish people had ruined his world, had murdered his deity, and were meant for enduring punishment for all time. Certainly were not entitled to be the blessed within the context of the blessings of Abraham, as we know they are, as we know we are. Yerushalayim was not an issue for him, and in fact, indeed, during negotiations, Menachem Begin was told by the Rebbe, study Parshas Vayishlach, and you will be prepared for that meeting. In other words, everything that you need to know about navigating this immense pressure that was brought to bear. Let me explain to you what this pressure was. So at one point during Camp David, Jimmy Carter wrote a note to Menachem Begin urging him to forego Yerushalayim, to allow Yerushalayim to remain in the context, out of the conversations of the future of Eretz Yisrael, of the state of Israel, and let it be in the hands of the Arabs, including Harabais, completely. Cede it to them, C-E-D-E, cede it to them. And he wrote a note as follows, Jimmy Carter. He says, sometimes a person must cut off a limb in order to save the body. That was his argument. Pragmatic argument. We'll do an amputation of the part that's problematic, and we'll continue to live a good, healthy, long life. Answered Menachem Begin to him, he said, yes, but what if that limb is the heart? Then that's not a good eitzah. One cannot cut out one's heart and then say, we're going to live. This was an actual conversation that took place. It shows you the mindset. So what is the challenge of Vayishlach? The challenge of Vayishlach is that the world's perception is that the Jewish people definitely exist. They definitely have some role to play. Some suggest as a proof by their suffering to the righteousness of others. In other words, that Hashem's anger with Klal Yisrael since the Churban has never dissipated, and therefore he has gone on to other endeavors of more worth, and the Jewish people have been relegated to eternal suffering. That's their position. It's either that or they've been simply replaced. Very nice people. The more moderate position is, okay, so Klal Yisrael was nice, but, been there, done that. And back in the day, they were important, and thank you very much for your contributions, but you're no longer relevant to the heart of the matter. And these are the two dangers that are presented when the non-Jewish, the Gentile world of today and of then encounter the Jewish people. They don't know what to make of the Jewish people. They understand that we have a unique relationship with God. We understand that the relationship has had ups and downs. We understand that we've had times of Geula and we have times of extreme galus. But that's the point. The relationship between Hashem and Klal Yisrael is usually extreme. So what I mean to say is nothing is typical when it comes to Klal Yisrael. That's why in the Torah, Hashem told Abraham in advance that we would be kekochvei shamayim. Either we're going to be literally on the top of the world, shining brightly, or we're going to be ka'afar hayam, will be something that everybody can tread on like the sands of the beach. This is an important reality about Klal Yisrael that Hashem communicated with Avraham Avinu from the very beginning. What does it mean? What is the point? So the point is that we are the only hope for portraying for God's God's significant representation in the world is Klal Yisrael. We represent the Ribono Shel Olam. When we are at our best and our finest, we can bring the Shechina to bear anywhere in the world, and even if we are worthy in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. That's when we're in the top of our game. That requires immense, the key word being chibur, connection, association, unity. If we are unified, if we are on top of our game, then we are unstoppable like the stars of the heavens. When we fragment, when we begin to point fingers, when we begin to see other parts of Klal Yisrael as disconnected, negative, or unworkable, that's when we can fall to the sands of the sea. So the analogy of that was in times of Yaakov Avinu was the nevuah that was associated with the Avnei Hamakom. That nevuah that Yaakov Avinu had was a very, very strange in many ways. Let's just take a little analysis going back to next week's Parsha. What happened? So according to Chazal, Yaakov Avinu goes back to Beersheba, backtracks to Beersheba, even though technically he might have been more in the area of Hebron. He was in Hebron. Okay, and then he backtracks to Beersheba, to the land where everything started, so to speak, where his father Yitzchak resided, where he had the bracha in the land of Gerar, so to speak, the border towns of Eretz Yisrael. Beersheba is the border of Eretz Yisrael. When you go beyond the borders of Beersheba, you're in Midbar Paran, or you're in Eretz Gerar, which Eretz Gerar is Eretz Yisrael, but it's a step down. It's a decompression chamber of Eretz Yisrael heading towards Mitzrayim. That's what Gaza is. And then, or you're in Midbar Paran, which is no man's land. So he goes back to the edge, back to the beginning, as it were, and then begins his meteoric ascent. Beersheba is sandy, it's a sandy place. It's close to Gerar, which is on the sea. Those are the lower points of Klal Yisrael. Ultimately, it would be in the region of Dan. Dan is Tel Aviv, Dan is that whole area. It's the outlying just outside the land of Yehuda towards the land of Dan. It's the starting point, and then he progressed towards Hebron, or towards Yerushalayim, and then Beit El, and then onward to Schwartz. So what happened when he miraculously went one step all the way to Haran? As Chazal tell us, he said, "How could it be that I skipped over Yerushalayim? I can't go from Beersheba to Golus in one step." Goes back, but he doesn't go back all the way. According to Rashi, Machlokas Rashi Ramban, Rashi says that the Har Moriah moved upwards, northwards, towards Beit El, which was the original landing point of Avram Avinu when he entered Eretz Yisrael from the other side, when he entered Eretz Yisrael from the land of Haran. And the Har Moriah, the Temple Mount, as it were, jumped northwards from the area which was in the border between the land of Yehuda and the land of Binyamin. Remember that Jerusalem is the northern border of Yehuda, Beersheba, the southern border of Yehuda. What comes immediately north of Yerushalayim, but I mean immediately north of Yerushalayim, is Binyamin. And at the next station, which is the north of Binyamin, which connects to Ephraim, right, which is the northern kingdoms, these are the children of Yosef, is Beit El. What's going on over here? Like, what is the message here? So I'd like to suggest the Sulam, that the dream that he had was all about the Golos. But it wasn't only about the Golos. There was a second theme that was going on that if we just pay attention, we see it so blatantly. The first theme was the Golos, the Sulam, that great ladder that went upwards to tell Klal Yisrael, listen, if you want to reach the potential of Kekochvei Shamayim, you want to reach our bias, you want to reach the fact that we're going to be broadcasting the message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the world. We're going to be teaching about Chibur, about the connection between Hashem and this world. If that's our message, then we better be mechubar ourselves. If you are unwhole, if you are disjointed, you cannot broadcast connection. You can't. You're not connected yourself. You're fragmented. If you're fragmented, you cannot preach unity. You cannot attach to others easily because you are isolated in yourself in some way that you cannot associate with the other parts of you which are different, which are foreign, which may not be comfortable. This is the great challenge of Klal Yisrael. So if the Sulam predicted the four kingdoms that would go up and down, that would challenge us as we go through that journey, with the worst one being the one that we are currently in for 2,000 years, which is Edom, Esav, goes up, 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 and will not seem to come down, which was what drove to a certain panic in that state of that dream. So that's one message, but there's a concurrent message, and that is the miracle of the Avonim, of the stones. Let's understand. As Yaacov was preparing for that dream, there was something simultaneously going on that most people don't make that chibur. They will not make that association. But I will tell you that it's blatant what Chazal are telling us, and it's very, very, very much part of the dream. It's very much part of the message that the Rabbi told Menachem Begin, and that he would tell us today, if he would be guiding us, and how he guides us Mishamayim. And that is, the Even Shesiya is that rock, and that rock is known as foundation stone. It's what's under Kippat HaSela. It's what's on our bias. It's the single most controversial point in the entire world, and yet the entire world depends on it. If you understand, right? The most explosive issue in the entire world is not drug cartels in Venezuela, is not atomic bombs in Iran, and it's not about the struggles between China and America, and it's certainly not about Gaza. It is all about Kippat HaSela. It's about underneath there, what we call the foundation stone, Even Shesiya. Chazal tell us that is the point of the Akedas Yitzchak. That was the point of Brias HaOlam. Rambam says that Adam imakom kaparoso nivra. It's the actual place where the sands, notice sands, of Adam Harishon, Adama, of the lowest elements, connected with the brilliant neshama, where the sands connect to the stars. That's the place where the sands connect to the stars, the Even Shesiya, from whence Hashem created the world, and more than that, according to Ramchal, it's the place from whence Hashem governs the world. What does that mean? That means, according to Ramchal, is that when you want to know whether there's going to be good weather in Venezuela, that depends on a spiritual but actually real connection between that makam and the other parts of the world, to such an extent that if we truly understood, imagine a nerve center, imagine a center, a brain, which controls the entire body. So if that's the brain of the world, that will tell the hands to move, the legs to move, the toes to move, the heart to be moved, right? Everything stems from that point. It is the control center. And that, of course, associates, as the Ramchal says, with the stars, which convey somehow the will of Hashem down to this world, with which Hashem governs the world. That doesn't mean we chas v'sholom think of them as deities. They are shluchim. They are shluchim, like Hashem has many, many shluchim, like any manager has, any CEO has many, many managers that manage certain systems. That's the hashgacha that Hashem created. He did a little bit to create space for us to have the impression of disunity, to the impression of chibur, and to call that out. Because the reality is there is nothing but chibur. We are all a chelek elokam imo. We are all unified under the thought waves of Hashem. We are, as it were, here given an incredibly unfathomable choice whether to stay associated with Hashem or to disconnect. That is the simple choice of mankind. That depends. If you want to associate with somebody, if you want to be mechaber yourself, you have to see the merit. No one wants to marry a criminal or terrorist. Here's my daughter, right? I'm going to present her to a terrorist, to a criminal, to a thief. Never. If you think that what's being presented to you, the match between us and Hashem, between us and other people, is the same, you're not going to choose to associate with people who are evil unless you want to be like them, which is a choice to dissociate from good. So ultimately, the Even Shasiya, which is that flashpoint, which of course, by definition, would be the most important place in the world. The only simplified choice. Reality boils down to, are you going to connect yourself to Hashem and others, or are you going to disconnect and remain in your own isolation, serving your own purposes and your needs? It's so simple. It's so simple. Now, there are many connectors. There are many ways to plug in your wires. Torah and mitzvos, gemilas chasadim. That's about it. Now, notice, Torah is not about you. You sit in a corner and learn Torah all day long. That's wonderful. But that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to teach Torah. We call it Talmud Torah. If you refuse to share your Torah with other people, and no one has access to it, and it's kept in a sealed box, then you have not accomplished the mitzvah whatsoever. And ultimately, you've stunted its value, and you've disrespected it. Torah is meant to be shared, because it's a vehicle of associating with Hashem. When 10 people get together in a room, Asara b'nei Adam sheyoshvim, they're going to sit down to daven or to a shir. That's going to be their association. That's going to be creating a chibur with the Shekhinah. So when Yaakov Avinu was at that point, what happened actually was that the Even Shasiya made its way northward, very, very unusually, and left the boundary line of Yehuda and Binyamin, and decided to take a journey northward to the border of Binyamin and Yosef. Why? Why in that one circumstance? Here was, I believe, an incredible, incredible message. Number one, that make Even Shasiya relevant wherever you are. That's message number one. It is not only, Judaism is not restricted to Yerushalayim. I'll be in Yerushalayim, I'll be a good Jew. If I leave Yerushalayim, I'll do what I want. No. You can create the Shekhinah, bring it down anywhere you are. That's message number one. But more importantly, the Jewish people have inherent conflict. The conflict between Yehuda and Yosef. Very, very big conflict. Who is the Bechor? Who is the leader? What are the priorities? Are we going to be more like Yehuda, Laharis Lafan of Goshna, which will be in the land of Yehuda, around Yerushalayim, and concentrating on inner Kedusha? Or are we going to be like Yosef, who's out there in the world and is being Makar of the world and bringing wealth and riches and blessings to the world, and through that, helping the non-Jewish world connect to the Jewish world? Or are we going to be more prioritized inward? And the answer is we cannot afford either one, to give up either one. We cannot draw the wagons, as it were, circle the wagons, as we've had to do so many years, thousands of years in Golus, and just survive. Think about being a Jew in Germany, in France, in the Middle Ages. You know, even then, the Bali Tosfos, with their incredible learning, with their Masorah that they had from the Gaonim, with their own unique interpretations of how to understand Shas, with the written text that they put together, which eventually became Rashi. And Rashi refined it and presented it to the entire world. The genius of the German, French, Limud Torah. We all have it. We can't learn Chumash without it. We can't learn Gemara without it. They share it the entire world. But they were entrapped in a hostile environment. And they were often murdered and expelled time and time again. And yet they needed to connect to that outside world to make Parnasa and so on. That is the Yosef experience. That experience requires both. You have to have the inner base medrash, and you have to have the outer ways to make a Parnasa with whatever ways they're affording you. Money lending, this, that. We don't even know how it's possible that Jews survived with our great strength. We survived in ways that today are completely unfathomable. Today, it's so much more obvious and evident and easy to be connected to Torah and Yiddishkeit. That was even before the advent of the internet, but now with the internet, there is no Jew anywhere in the world that cannot educate themselves in Torah mitzvos and Shiurim, listen to thousands and thousands and thousands of presentations of Torah, Jewish music, information about Chagim, Halacha L'Maisa. Today, there's a new posek and his name is Rabbi Rabbi AI. Rabbi AI. What does that mean? You want information? Say, I need information about this halacha. Bring me the shas and poskim that talk about this issue. Okay, no problem. Here they are. Rav Moshe says this, and Shlomo Zalman says this. And why? Why all of a sudden? Because Hashem wants us to say, don't say you can't connect. Don't say you can't find out. Don't say there's no way for me to understand. You want to learn Daf Yomi? There's Shiurim in every single language, and every single speed, and every single... There's a rush and there's a way. To connect has never, ever been better. And yet, at the same time, we face the greatest isolation that we've ever had in the history of the world at the same time. People isolating themselves into their own thoughts, problems, and issues. So, what was the message that Yaacov received? It was a twofold message. He said, if you're going to survive this long journey from Afar to Kachavim, then try to hold the Avadim together. Yaakov took Mi'avnei Amakom. That was the Evan Shasiya. He tried to build a Klal Yisrael, 12 Shvatim. That was his almost impossible task. Yaakov Avinu's task was to hold us together. He never did anything else. Down to his very last moment of life, he gave blessings to his 12 sons in order to create a unified Klal Yisrael. He mourned the loss of Yaakov and Yosef and could never be consoled because it represented a failure to his primary objective, which was to hold Klal Yisrael together into one unit of Chibur. Now I'm just going to make an aside and say that there was someone who was the issue for a little. Bela Rivka Sasson. She was a woman who lived in Borough Park. She grew up and went to Shalamis school early back in the day and fought her way to get Torah education. She was one of the founding students of Mechlala, made it to Israel, worked on the kibbutzim, married, raised a family of B'nai Torah, and she was a staunch, what I would call, believer in chibur and connection. And she would bless people always that they should be connected to the Jewish people and to Eretz Yisrael. Everything she lived and breathed. She did enormous chesed. She took foster children into her home. She raised them. She adopted them. She had her own children, but her chesed went beyond that. People needed money. She raised money for them. It wasn't like something that she worked on. It exuded out of her. And I experienced that. Her home was an open home for the students of Yeshiva Torah Das in the mid-'80s, where we were getting smicha and growing up, and that place yielded many Talmidei Chachamim, Manhigim, Rabbanim. But her home was the makom where we students used to go for a Shabbos, for a chesed, for someone to talk to, for an aim for those of us who our families were so many of us out of town. And her passing yesterday was graced by speeches from Rabbanim of all kinds. She had an eye store. She had an optometry store. I actually was zocheh to preside over her husband's funeral about 20 years ago, a little less. But at that optometry store in Borough Park, not only were all students of Torah V'das welcome, not only were all children that needed homes, like from Ohel in the early days, came to her home, but big Rabbonim, Rosh Yeshiva, Chassidish Rabbonim were her clients, and she all helped them see. And she never, ever played games with who she was. She was Tzioni, she was Dati, but in her world and her values, she could treat someone who was Satmar, the Satmar Rebbe himself. She could treat big Rosh Yeshivas, and she advocated for students who had special needs, that they should be included in the yeshivas. That's what she did. She took in children, and she made sure, and poor people, make sure that they were included in the community, that they had what they needed, that they had special education. One of the Rabbanim got up and said, she made me go to meetings that I should have special children with learning disabilities accepted to my yeshiva. Who was even caring about those people back in the day? She forced them to go. She advocated. She demanded that there be accommodation to those who would necessarily be those little stones that might fall away. She demanded connection. If you didn't call her for a certain period of time, she had tainas on you. You had to call. You had to visit. You had to keep in touch. I never experienced such a thing. We were independent kids. I was an out-of-towner. Since when did this woman, who was our dead mother, and she had connections to all of our students, she wanted to know, how are you doing? Call me. What's going on? How are you? I never experienced anything like it to this day. And it turns out, ironically, this is a crazy story, but Friday when I arrived from Eretz Yisrael here, her son, Reb Shai, good friend of mine, called me from Eretz Yisrael, trying to make a connection. Are you here? Let's get together. He goes, actually, I'm here. He says, where's your mom? My mom is living in Muncie with my sister. She's not so well. And I said, you know what? I have occasion to go to Muncie. I hope to go to the Ribnitz Rebbe. Hopefully today, everybody, I'm going to go to the Ribnitz Rebbe. Please send your names for Tfilos. Keep a kesher to the tzaddikim. So I said, okay, I'm going to go visit her. And then I get a call Motzei Shabbos that she passed away. I said, either way, I was going to see her. Either way, instead of a visit to the Shiva house. And I was by the Levi in the driving rain yesterday here in New York. We drove from Borough Park all the way to Queens. How ironic. Connecting worlds. And it just hit me. Her name was Chana Bela Rivka. Chaver Chibur. Chaver Chibur. So it hit me that this is the incredible theme of Yaakov's life. Was how do we keep these 12 stones together? How do we make them one? Right? And everybody wants to be connected to the tzaddik, and that's really the answer. That through the tzaddikim, we become tzaddikim. Through emulating the ways of Ruach Yisrael Saba, Yaakov Avinu himself, we become motivated to care about another person, to look at their suffering. She was ironically an optometrist office. Her husband was an eye doctor, and she ran the office just to help other people see the need for chibur. See the need for chibur. So what was a Satmar Rebbe coming in, or Rosh Yeshiva coming in, or heads of Jew girls' high schools, Ohel, Bachrim from out of town, and Eretz Yisrael was her dream, because that's the land of chibur. So what the message is that was conveyed to Yaakov Avinu is that you're going to have to hold it together. So you can imagine how difficult it was when Yaakov had, in this week's Parsha, to separate his flock and his families into different parts. How ironic that he had, it says that Yaakov Avinu wanted to, actually he didn't, but he thought to divide the camps. That maybe if Esav comes and he destroys part of Klal Yisrael, we'll be able to regenerate Klal Yisrael from the rest. This was a very difficult thing. Yaakov Avinu never had to do that. Instead of putting them in separate camps, what he did is he put them in consecutive order. He put the Shvachos, and then he put the Bnei Leah. That's not called separation. That's called prioritization or finding your place in the order. They were never fully separated. So the accomplishment of Yaakov Avinu at the end of his life was to bring all the 12 Shvatim around his bedside and bless them and explain to them how they could and how they would play a role in Klal Yisrael. Bikesh Yaakov legalis hakates. He wanted to go already to that final ending, where we were all, Yaakov sitting in a bed in Mitzrayim, barely being able to be buried in Hebron, let alone ascend to Yerushalayim. And he had that dream at that time. And Akash Baruch Hu has done in our generation an amazing thing. Mekabetz Nidchei Amo Yisrael. He started, not completed, but started the aggregation of Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, and the chibur between the Bnei Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz through Torah, and now through a Goro. It is impossible to be a Jew anywhere in the world without being evaluated in the context of Israel. Isn't that amazing? Someone could live in Australia, someplace in New Zealand, and say, what do I have to do with Israel? I'm a Jew, leave me alone. No, you are a Zionist. What do you mean I'm a Zionist? What kind of Zionist? I have nothing to do with it. I don't go to the army, and I don't, nothing. I sit and learn Torah here in New Zealand. What does that have to do with me? No. You're going to get protesters at your door saying that you're a genocidal person because you're denying the idea that somebody else is in charge of Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. What do we do? This famous episode that actually launched the secular Zionist leader Herzl on his journey, which he was successful, which was really truly amazing, to create a Jewish state. He took on the job to make a Jewish state, and he was successful. Hashem gave him Siyata Shema, a Jew that knew nothing, absolutely nothing about Yiddishkeit, nothing. But he had a ratzon to bring the Jews back to their home, to create a chibur between Hashem and between the Jewish people and the land of Israel, not necessarily Hashem, but the land of Israel. And he was successful because that's what Hashem wants. Hashem wants chibur. That's what Hashem wants ultimately. And therefore, he saw the Dreyfus trial, which was where a Jew, it was a distinguished French officer, this is in the late 1800s, of course everybody knows the story, was accused of treason, and there was a mock trial, and it was all a big fake and a big charade, much like the international criminal courts, much like the courts, unfortunately, that are going through such travail in Israel today about their honesty, about their intention, about their political motivations. This is what I'll get to in a moment, what's happening. And he said, I can't believe this. This Jew, Dreyfus, did everything I would want. He was loyal to France. He wasn't observing his fighting for France and this and that. And this is the treatment that he deserves, that he's a Jew and he's a traitor. What's going on over here? And then he realized there's no escape. And at the Dreyfus trial, they actually brought up classic anti-Semitic tropes, such as that it says in the Talmud that Ata Nikra Adam Ve'ein Eino Yehu, but a non-Jew is not called Adam. Only Klal Yisrael is called Adam. So that seemed to be a very terribly anti-Semitic thing. But most of the anti-Semitic tropes you'll see is that the Jews look down on Goyim, want Goyim to be their slaves. That's what they. It all goes back to the bracha of Yaakov and Esav. Who's going to be serving who? It's nothing. There's absolutely no new information in the world and no new issues. It's all replaying the same ancient issues again and again. Who's the master? Who's the slave? Jews want to enslave us. They'll take all our money. It's all the same. And they were leveled with this accusation. One of the rabbis one of the people who spoke on behalf of the Jewish people at the time, said, let me explain to you what that means. It means that when a Jew anywhere in the world is accused of a crime, then all Jews are held accountable. So back in that day, there was, and Moses Mendelssohn was involved in this because he was so mechubar to the Goyish world. He could talk to them. They thought about a blood libel in Damascus. Crazy. Back in the blood libels. And then they asked him, how could it be that Jews on one side of the world are being beaten and threatened because of something that a Jew did on the other side of the world? He says that's what it means to be an Adam. An Adam is an integrated being. One person has hands, feet, toes, nose, whatever, all over, but they're one person. So if the tip of the pinky does something wrong, that means the brain did something wrong. He says that's why we are called Adam. We are one being. You are not Nikra Adam. When some guy in Ireland, which is not a good country in terms of love of Israel, that's for sure, and does something wrong, we don't hold all Irish people accountable across the world. But if a Jew does something wrong, we hold him accountable from all across the world because we're Mechubar, we are Adam. Adam stands for Adam David Mashiach. Throughout history, from the beginnings of time, whether it's from Adam Rishon's time through Mashiach, we're one. And that's what's really being demonstrated here. So that's theme number one. Theme number one is Chibur. That was the message of Yaakov. That's the goal of Yaakov Avinu. How do we hold together the Shvatim? How do we get Yosef and Yehuda, which is this theme of the next several parshas, all the way to the end of Yaakov Avinu's life, will be the struggle to create unity between the different factions, the different units of Klal Yisrael. And that is the theme today. Eretz Yisrael is rife with inner conflict that I believe is driven outwardly because inwardly we really don't have that many issues with each other. But the forces that wish to splinter and fragment and destroy the unity of the Jewish people with each other are so strong in the land of Israel today, as they've always been. But now it's a clamor. It's a clamor. There's not one politician on the non-Likud side of the coalition who wishes not to take Netanyahu, either A, force him to resign in disgrace, and resign and go to jail, or be removed from power immediately. What's going on? What is this all about? He's the elected leader of the majority. People say, yeah, remember, Netanyahu asked for a pardon. The pardon is a litmus test of the chibur of Am Yisrael, or its fragmentation. This is my comment. If people protest, he should never be pardoned. What did he do wrong? Nobody even knows what he did wrong. He's on trial for 6 years. They can't even find anything to be ma'ashim him on that's worthy of some sort of punishment. And yet, this is the ultimate disgrace that they decree that he's held prisoner 3 days a week. Can you imagine your own prime minister is in jail 3 times a week testifying at a bogus trial? About what? He has to testify. What can he testify to already? How much can you testify for 6 years? You know? He has to testify about testifying. There's nothing else to testify about. Testify that you testified. He's in prison. He's in prison by forces. Now, whether they are coming inwardly from the voice of those people or being egged on by agitators, political players who are very, very wealthy and very, very politically active, whether they're Goyim or whether they're Jews inside Eretz Yisrael, that fund the protests, that fund the discord, that wish to rip the state of Israel into pieces over whatever issue it might be, whether it's the draft, whether it's the war, whether it's the judicial process, whether it's the captives. It doesn't really matter. It's like Netanyahu himself said, it's a whiteboard. You put the problem of the day here, why we should tear the country apart, and we'll go out and protest, and people are being paid to protest, and it's a farce. And why is it that this is allowed to carry on? So there's one voice that says stop. And ironically, that voice comes from outside. That's the voice of President Trump. He said, stop the trial. Just stop it already. Stop the inner fighting. This is the reason, these protests are the reason why you were attacked on October 7th to begin with. Because our enemies thought that we're weak, divided, distracted, and we were. And who knows what happened on October 7th as a result of different opinions. Even today, no one knows what the Attorney General's opinion is, and her associates is this way. East Justice is that way, and the political Likudniks are that way, and then the left-wing parties are that way. And either way, you're going to get a protest. If you touch anything in Eretz Yisrael, it's a bomb. Whether right now, what's happening in our world, the test of Chibur is, are you going to allow some sort of arrangement so Yeshiva Bachim can continue to learn and yet also serve with the security? Or is anything you do bad? And we just want to keep the problem boiling and alive to stew hatred and accusations across the board. They tried one reading of a new bill already. People are saying, if this bill goes, I'm going to resign. So go resign. I mean, who cares? We need a resolution. We need chibur. And any voice of dissolution and disunity is a danger to the Jewish people, a terrible danger. The judges prosecutors who keep Netanyahu in jail for 3 days a week, that he has to get out from his teacher to go out and deal with nuclear threats to the state of Israel. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? Are you absurd? No country in the history of the world would ever do that to their leader. Can you imagine George Washington being under lock and key for 3 days by Congress while he tried to lead the country? Are you kidding me? It's not possible. So look at that. Number one, the Netanyahu trial is a symptom of disunity. The Yeshiva Bachrim issue is a symptom of disunity, right? The struggle over judicial powers, secular or otherwise, is a issue of disunity. The control of the lands of the land of Israel, what rights Arabs have to continuously build and to destroy Jewish attempts to build, horrible, horrible disunity. The support of terrorism with our own hands, of feeding Hamas so that it can stabilize, regroup, and maintain its power is an issue of internal disunity. If we can't open our eyes and take a look, that the stones that represent the Amud of Shnei Masar are being hammered at from every position, the breach, the break, the Kilu Mechiras Yosef, the Mechiras Yosef of it all, the betrayal of it all, the viewing the other as the ultimate danger, as opposed to the ultimate solution. Ultimately, it has to be understood that Yosef is the solution. Yosef is the, so he says, L'michya shalachani, I came here to save you, not to destroy you. How ironic. How ironic. Will there be a turning point where we can honestly say, enough of the voices of division? We're not perfect. We are not without blame. Aval Ashemim Anachnu, Yehuda said. Aval Ashemim Anachnu. We are. We say it in our davenings, right? We are to a certain extent in need of self-examination, repair, motivation, putting aside our internal concerns for the greater good of the Jewish people. We have to. And the other splintering is where the nation of the world will try to distinguish between Israel and the Jewish people, but then again will, as we said earlier, blame the Jewish people for anything that Israel does. So let's call it the truth. I am alarmed. We should all be alarmed. But it's never been different. That's the point. It's not a new thing. This is the age-old struggle for unity that besieged Yaakov Avinu the moment he had his dream. The moment that it was necessary by the Rabbanah Shalom to take Har Moriah itself and put it on the border of Yosef and Binyamin, who is friendly, who is blameless, who was not involved in the Mechiras Yosef, and connects physically to Yehuda, right? Puts it on the boundary of Yosef and Binyamin as if to say, hold on, don't let go. This is our life raft. Yaakov Avinu's dream, the Chibur of the Avanim, right here. Because if we don't hold on over there, then we cannot be unified in Yerushalayim. And the history of Klal Yisrael was like that. Shlomo and David managed to unify the Jewish people for all of what? 80 years? And among those 80 years, rife with conflict. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing because it's the challenge of mankind and of the world, what we're created for. So don't be in despair. But we just have to choose the right decisions. To love every Jew to try to reach out at the same time and teach them Torah and be makar of them through our deeds, through our actions, through our concern. To understand a little bit about that lady, Hanukkah Sasson, and what she really believed, the people that weren't even particularly close to her. She demanded connection. You barely know me. You're not even who are you to me? No, call me. How are you? What's going on? Check in. Be part of the chevra. Funny, she used to call all of our friends in Torah Vodaas the chevra. How appropriate. Chibur. That was her name, Chana Bela Rivka. She said, you guys are friends. Some are more friendly than others. Some are more peripherally friends. We're all part of a general network of friends. We know each other. We're friendly. Some are very close. They see each other every day. Some speak once a yoivel. No. To her, there was no difference. Whether you spoke to each other once a yoivel or once you spoke to each other every single day, you were in the same chibur. A remarkable thing. That insight is also. Now, the last point, I'll go back to Venezuela. One of the key forces of destruction of the world that would like to utilize the destruction of human beings, i.e. drugs, as a way of weakening countries, weakening and destroying individuals, families. Let's be very honest. America, and to a lesser extent Israel, we're too busy fighting for our lives to worry about. America doesn't have to worry about fighting for their lives. So they are fighting for their lives in other ways, against depression, sadness, lack of meaning, lack of purposelessness, isolation, hatred, dissociation, a disorientation, no connection between parents and teachers and friends and the government itself, and the values that are at clash, if there are any values at all. People resort to drugs because they're in a lot of pain. The opioid situation in America is so dramatic. We're not talking about marijuana. Marijuana was legalized. They don't even care about marijuana. But marijuana was a gateway to many, many other drugs. Oxycodone, and all these horrific drugs that are flowing through into America that are funding terror. This is how Hamas makes a living. This is how Al Qaeda made a living. You know how much poppies from Lebanon and heroin was the original source of Yasser Arafat Yamach Shemo's PLO. And to destroy and weaken America, you can flood the country with drugs that are so powerful that one dose will destroy a life. And this is what's going on. I read somewhere where there's the police, the fire department usually gets called for emergencies. We have Hatzalah. They have the fire departments across America. Do you know how many overdoses they get called in from? The firemen are exhausted from their shifts because every 5 minutes they're getting a call, another overdose. And the firemen themselves can't take it, and they have to split their shifts because what they see is a country that's burning down, but it's burning down not only from the outside, but from the inside. Burning down from the inside because of a lack of association with between the guf and the neshama. If there's no value, purpose, and if there's only a value of tearing down, the protests in America today are about lawlessness, looting, Palestinianism. Is an open violation against law and order and goodness in the name of what? Giving money to poor people who are in pain and suffering and don't think that they have, and don't believe that they have anything good in them enough to earn it themselves. Okay? Venezuela fell into a great evil, is run by the socialist left, and has become a funnel of drugs and alcohol into the United States that has literally threatening the people. One thing you have to say to Trump is that he is honest about what the problem is and doesn't fake. He's not fake. Maybe he's fake in other ways, but he's not fake in ignoring the truth of the problem. What he did in the last 24 or 48 hours was to tell Venezuela and to tell all the countries, China, and all the other countries that are funding this mass assault on America internally through drugs, that their airspace is closed and there will be no more flights flying in endless amounts of drugs that are life destructive, and making billions of dollars doing so. Very interesting development. Let's see. Because the roots of evil are being exposed, both in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world. This is the process of the Geula that we're in. It's called Birur HaEmes. We have to separate the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra and go from that tree to the Eitz HaChaim, which we know is our Neshama, Torah, Mitzvos, Chibur Takash Baruch Hu. The only way you're going to survive the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra is if you listen to Eitz HaChaim. Means that by definition you're associated with the kedusha of a neshama. You're not going to destroy lives with drug, alcohol, greeds, lust, all the mitzvos which are self-destructive. You have to affirm life. You have to embrace life, and not in a way which is destructive to others. So here we are in one of the most important, maybe certainly the most important year to date, but in a year which has implications for Mashiach. Tavshin Pei Vav. We've said before is the Eis Shalom, as we said earlier. We noted from Koheles, many people pointed out that the world is based on the Eis Shalom, and we're in that final epoch, and this is the Eis Shalom. So where is the Shalom? But the Shalom, Shalom has to be fought for. We are very grateful to Kadosh Baruch Hu in this year, in this last 2 years, despite all the hardships, that the progenitors of evil have taken a big klop. Iran took a big klop. Hezbollah, big klop. Okay, Syria, big klop, even though they're very troublesome. Lebanon, and they're about to get more. Gaza. They're being hit hard, and often the vehicle for hitting them is Israel. And now Venezuela is up on the docks. The sources of evil, the behaviors that are destructive to this world, that are of a dissociation, of turning man into afar, are being viewed. And at the same time, the efforts are being redoubled. Canada just outlawed another charity that supports Israel because of the BDS people. We've lost all the British Empire. The British Empire, who were friendly to the Jewish people to whatever extent they were, never totally, was a haven for Jews after the Holocaust. Britain, South Africa, Australia. How many Yidden from the Holocaust survived to these places? Even New Zealand, even certainly Canada. How many Platei Shoah found refuge? Eretz Yisrael, which was under the mandate. You follow me? The British Empire was a place of refuge. And now, across-the-board hatred, denunciation, danger. And what's left? America? Not so pashut. Mamdani, AOC. I will tell you right now that Trump is 2 years left? 3 years left? And after him, I think there may be one more presidency of Trumpian hashba'ah, whether it'll be Rubio or his vice president, who I'm no great fan of. Maybe, and we don't know how pro-Israel they'll be, maybe they'll kvetch out another presidency, much like Reagan produced another Bush presidency after him. But it was a kaltazach. And then after that, AOC Mamdani in the White House? Is that what we have to look forward to? Yes, that's what we have to look forward to, unless Mashiach. So don't think that all is Chas v'Shalom lost. It's just that the battle is very pitched. If Baruch Hashem, we shall be Zoche to remain b'chibur, if they'll allow the yeshiva students to learn Torah to whatever extent, if they'll allow a pardon for Netanyahu, if they'll back off the judiciary and say we're here to serve Klal Yisrael and not to serve secular Arabism, and we're not here to make, like Bennett, a government that includes Muslim Brotherhood. Adrabah, for the first time, Trump said no Muslim Brotherhood. And he's like the only voice, and he's problematic, very problematic. So we, Klal Yisrael, have to remember that we're in the months of encounter with Esav, and even with Paro, but the bigger encounter is ours within. Yaacov Avinu saw a remarkable thing. Hashem said, move Har Moriah to the point of conflict. Move your values to the point of conflict. If we will create that chibur, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us and save us in these months and in remarkable times. That Ra should be mevur from the world, finally, as we daven for every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that Mamshela Zodoin should be taken out of the world. Gaza is Machnelches Zodoin, Iraq is Zodoin, Syria is Zodoin, and many, many, many others. The Afar should be Tichle, and B'ez Hashem, a great light of Hanukkah should spark. In those days of Hanukkah, they saw the remarkable thing that the all-pervasive Greek Empire, which had blanketed the world for 150 years without any stop, was able to be sent away by one group of Jews that came together and said, Mi Lashem Elai. And they were zocha to banish immense darkness. That's our task this month, B'ez Hashem. We should see a great hispashtus or and a chibur of Klal Yisrael to Torah mitzvos. We should inspire each other and keep talking about it, because from week to week, this is our goal. Help another Jew, teach another Jew, love another Jew, speak for the truth, and don't be antagonistic, don't contribute to machlokas, but be a voice for reconciliation, conciliation, and comfort. Let's have a great week.